station, but you can also watch us too. We're over at supertalktv.com. Now, when you hear about conservation efforts, you might not think about birds, but birds are pretty important. And joining us today to talk a little bit more is Emily Jo, also known as EJ. EJ Williams with the American Bird Conservancy. She's the Vice President of the Southeast and Atlantic Coast region. We've also got Kristine Evans. She's an Associate Professor in the Mississippi State Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and I guess aquaculture. That's a different one. It's not agriculture. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
You know, the aquaculture, I'm gonna have to say, let's try it again. Kind of caught me off guard. That's pretty cool. I think and I also think what you girls are up to is pretty good stuff with the Tombigbee Forest Bird Partnership. With EJ, I'm gonna start with you. So how did this Tombigbee Forest Bird Partnership come about?
Well, Rebecca, American Bird Conservancy started working with several corporate forest partners in 2014. And we wanted to look at sustainably managed forests and better understand their value to native birds and also take advantage of opportunities to enhance habitat conditions for birds on these working forests. And we identified 5 focal areas across the southern U.S., with one of those being around the Aliceville, Alabama area. And as we worked together over the years, that expanded over into Mississippi, and Kristine got involved with helping us with some survey work. And so that went really well. And as we were supported by some grants from the Sustainable Forestry Initiative. And as we wrapped up those grants, that group of partners that included International Paper, the Westervelt Company, Weyerhaeuser, CA Barge Timberlands, that group said, man, we like working together. We think this is valuable both for the forest and for the birds. So we said, all right, and we formed this partnership and identified some objectives and, talked about how we wanted to work together to keep this big, wonderful forested landscape in forests and also doing good things for birds.
That sounds like it's really cool, and I think it's something for us to also think about when we look into our vast forest or sort of fields of trees. They're serving more purpose than just looking pretty or sort of lending to the forestry industry here in Mississippi. Kristine, what is avian conservation? How would you sort of describe that, though?
Oh, well, that's a great question, and some of it ties into what EJ just mentioned. Many of us have bird feeders looking outside of our kitchen windows. Many of us have had experiences with birds of different kinds. Many of us are bird hunters. Birds have been part of human culture for thousands and thousands of years, and especially our native birds, the birds that have been here long before humans, and there's many, many species here that are native. We have a recognition that keeping them in the systems and on the landscape that they're supposed to be in is important. And as we work and live in these landscapes, we can affect the birds that are here and have been here for a very long time. So avian conservation is really focused on making sure that we are prioritizing the bird species that are supposed to be here and working within our working landscapes like managed pine forests to make sure that we can sustain native wildlife. Obviously, conservation is about far more than birds, but birds are a great ambassador. We love working with birds because people see them, people can be connected with them, and they're a great ambassador for the rest of the wildlife community.
Well, I'm one of those that loves my bird feeder, so I feel like I may be doing a small part. Hopefully I'm doing the right thing. But EJ, y'all talk about this idea of working forests, which again, it goes to us lay people. We just see trees and we're like, is it working? What is it doing? And then how can it make a difference in this avian conservation?
Great question, Rebecca. So working forests, there's not one tight definition, but they tend to be forests that are sustainably managed, and they have multiple objectives. Typically, some of the objectives are economic returns, recreation, wildlife conservation, legacy, and inheritance. But a key part of it is active management. And keep in mind that it's amazing what these native forests can provide, because they provide all those forest-based products that all of us use every day. Simple things like paper towels and toilet paper and the boxes that all our Christmas goodies are coming in these days. And in addition to providing all those outputs, they can provide a home for birds. And so it's good for people to remember that it's good that you're using forest-based products, because that demand helps landowners own that land and pay the taxes and make management happen on those places. And so the way it can contribute to bird conservation is, one, birds need a lot of forest. And about 90% of the forest in the South, which is millions of acres, are privately owned. And they come with a lot of different objectives, and all those different objectives have different outcomes and create different habitat conditions. And so that diversity of conditions, but within a really big area of forest, is just what birds need. And they find young forests and pine forests and bottomland hardwood forests all, in the same sort of areas together, and that really makes a good place for the birds, is that variety of habitats, but also that just stay in, they're sustained as forests. And that's really important.
Kristine, we talk about, or you've mentioned our native birds here in Mississippi, and I don't think we give much thought to the fact that there is biodiversity when it comes to bird species, that we just think that there's birds out there. But usually you'll have 3 or 4 that fly up to your bird feeder and they look completely different. How important is it that we sort of keep the diversity in our bird species?
Yeah, that's a great question. And to tie it to native managed forests, one of our sites in Kemper County, which if you're familiar with Kemper County, it's heavily a managed forest landscape. We found 76 different bird species on that one managed forest landscape site. So there's a lot more species of native birds than really you can imagine, and many, probably nearly all of the species that are coming to your listeners' feeders are going to be native species. Why is that important? Why is it important to have many different types of species? Well, those species eat different types of food. And if you think about especially seed-eating birds, as they're eating, they're also pooping, right? So they're going out onto the landscape and they're spreading seeds. So we have to give birds a lot of credit for being constructors of a lot of the plant communities that we have. So it's all, we all say it's all one big ecosystem, right? The birds are spreading the seeds. The birds are living off of the seeds that are spread. It's all really, really important, but different species require different parts of that landscape. So in general, we try to keep as many of our native species that have these intricate ties to the ecosystem as possible. We don't want those species to blink out on the landscape.
Well, now we have a reason to spin it positive. When a bird poops on our car or a windshield, we can just now look at the bird and think, oh, it was doing its part to spread seeds and, have a positive and have a positive impact. And EJ, it makes me sad, though, to think that maybe, our more modernized lifestyle has contributed to the slow bird population decline. But are there other things that have sort of led to the need for conservation, for avian conservation?
Well, certainly habitat loss is one of the things we have to contend with. I think that's one of the wonderful things about working in that Tombigbee, forest bird partnership area is it's for the most part still a pretty rural forested landscape. And in a lot of parts of the country and in the South, that's not the case. So, when we lose those natural habitats to other uses, that's a loss for the birds. But some other things to think about. One is that these birds have really complex lifestyles. They're only with us, a lot of them. Some of them are here all year long, but a lot of these little birds are only in Mississippi for maybe 3 or 4 months, and then they may go to Central America or even Northern South America and in the Caribbean for the winter. So we have to work both in the areas in Mississippi and the South where they breed, but also internationally to make sure they have a place to spend the winter. And then another thing to think about, everybody can do something for birds, even if they have just a small backyard. As you mentioned, you've got bird feeders out. And, man, as long as you keep those feeders clean, that's a great thing because you get to enjoy the birds. And in a harsh wintertime, it might even be the difference in them making it through.
Can you ladies stick with us?
And people can plant native plants
Oh, EJ, I
And
hate
that's
to
a
interrupt, but we're coming up a break. Can you ladies stick with us?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
All righty, we've got more with the Tombigbee Forest Bird Partnership coming up. We're continuing our conversation with EJ and Kristine about the Tombigbee Forest Bird Partnership. It's an effort to showcase and maintain the values of sustainable forest management in private forest lands to increase bird populations, which I'm learning is a good thing. And EJ, you were at least affirming the fact that if you've got bird feeders and you keep them clean, then you are helping in this in the small way that you can, correct?
That's right. That's right. And things like planting native plants and, being sure that your windows don't create a collision hazard for birds. There's a lot of things that people can do.
Well, you talk about the native, Kristine. I'm just curious, what are our most native here in Mississippi? I'm learning that they fly all around. So the international aspect of this, I feel like I'm on a bigger mission with my bird feeder now. It's International Bird Avian Conservation. I feel important. But what are our native ones that if we look out our window, we normally will see here in the state?
And not all of them are migratory. So if you think about probably the most auspicious one being the northern cardinal, or what a lot of folks call the redbird, that's one of our most common native resident birds, and that's one you'll see around in the wintertime. Let's see, many of the sparrows, actually probably all of the sparrows except a house sparrow, those are non-native. So the ones you see at the Walmart signs, or in the Walmart parking lot, those are a non-native species, but most of the other sparrows are going to be native. Our blue jays are going to be native, the ones that you all probably see and hear, and of course mockingbirds, which many of your listeners have been dive bombed before. Those are native species, so you're going to see a lot at your feeders that are native, and many of those species live in really remote forests. When we do bird surveys and we're out in the middle of nowhere, we have cardinals, so they share the urban landscape and the rural landscape with us.
I think that birds are one of the wildlife, no matter where you live, whether it's urban or rural or anywhere in between, you feel a little connected with nature just by a simple bird feeder or putting out your hummingbird feeder or just having the right plants, as EJ mentioned. And it's cool to sort of recognize and sort of be able to tell the difference in the birds. I've become a bird fan over the last couple of years. And so, you're really encouraging me to get a little more interested in what's in my own backyard. But EJ, this partnership, though, is sort of like for a specific piece of land there in the Tombigbee area. And y'all talk about sustainability and sort of, enhancements in the management. What are some of the goals of this partnership?
So some of the goals, a big one is communication, is getting that story out like you're helping us do today, Rebecca, and letting people know, how valuable these forests are and just the thoughtfulness that goes into stewarding these forests by the landowners, whether they're corporate or individual family owners. So communication and telling our stories. We also want to promote our bird-friendly forest practices, and we've got a really nice little guidebook that helps people understand some of the really straightforward things they can do that are good for birds. We use the area as a demonstration site, so we host workshops for forest managers and landowners. And then our other kind of big area of objectives is research. And, of course, Kristine and some of her colleagues there at Mississippi State are involved in some great research in the area. And then Dr. Daniel Green with Weyerhaeuser's conducting some really valuable research on birds and pollinators and some of the other wildlife species that use these forests.
Kristine, what do you want communities listening to Good Things to know about the importance? I know we talked about the bird feeders, and that's kind of fun with the kids, but we go most of our day not thinking about birds or the importance of them. So what do you want us to take home from this?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say that the first thing to think about is when you hear the word conservation, it's not always just about setting aside some pristine piece of land and not touching it. Conservation is all around us. People planting row crops can engage in conservation practices that support native grasses or improve water quality. Conservation is really part of this bigger landscape, both working and non-working lands, and that's central. You don't want to only think about lands that humans aren't touching as part of the conservation landscape. So that's number one. Number two for me is the importance of connecting with the younger folks. So one of the issues that we're seeing is that that connection to the outdoors that many of people in my generation and older have, because we spend a lot of time outdoors, we're losing that in the younger generations. People, even my own children, I can't hardly get to go outdoors, and I'm one of the big conservation people in the state. So trying to figure out how to engage the youth and connect them with outdoors. Mississippi is an amazing state that's full of people that have a deep love for the outdoors, more so than many other states in the country. And I want to make sure we sustain that, and it's really important to get that message out. And if it's figuring out that you really like birds, that's a great segue into the world of conservation.
Well, you ladies really do like birds. I mean, you've made a career out of it. EJ, to end up being the vice president of American Bird Conservancy for the Southeast and Atlantic Coast region, that's a big business card, by the way, EJ. I mean, how did you find your pathway or career path for bird conservancy?
Well, it's kind of a twisted path, but I fell in love with wildlife at a very early age and just kind of never really had any other path that looked good to me. So, I had an interest. I hunted and I fished with my daddy, and we would watch birds, not seriously, but, we'd watch the backyard birds we had. And we'd watch birds while we were fishing. I can remember my first prothonotary warbler along a creek, this bright yellow swamp canary. And, I just fortunately stayed with that. I went to the University of Georgia and got my master's degree in wildlife biology. And I've worked for the state of Georgia, for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and now American Bird Conservancy. So I've been working with birds and landowners for a couple of decades now. So, yeah, it's my passion, and I love it, not just professionally, but personally. It's something that's just, what I love to do.
Well, EJ, what's your favorite bird?
Oh, somebody yesterday said my favorite bird is my next bird, and that's probably the closest, but I'd be hard-pressed not to either say swallowtail kite, prothonotary warbler, painted bunting. Those would be three of my top ones.
So, Kristine, I'm going to kind of ask you the same question, except for the fact that I'm really interested in this wildlife fisheries and aquaculture. Say it right for me. I'm bum-puzzled by it, but I love it. That's an opportunity for students here in our state. How did you get to be a professor there?
Yeah, again, similar story to EJ. I knew I wanted to be a wildlife biologist since I was probably about 5 years old, and continued on that path through my education. I came here to Mississippi as a grad student and left for a little bit, but ended up coming back. Always wanted to do avian research and have managed to continue there. The Department of Wildlife Fisheries and Aquaculture is a very applied department here at Mississippi State. The reason aquaculture is on there is because we do a lot of work with the catfish industry or with the Gulf shrimp industry. We do a lot of work thinking about how some of these species that were historically wildlife and are now managed kind of can be the same models for research as some of our wild species. So that's where aquaculture comes from. We have the MSU Deer Lab, which many people are familiar with. Lots of different research niches in the department, including our bird niche. And I come from a quail background, so I did both my graduate degrees in bobwhite quail. Love that bird. Many folks also love hearing the bobwhite whistle out in the grassland landscape. So that's one that is close to my heart and has probably motivated me here in Mississippi to continue to do research on.
So would it be fair to ask you what your favorite bird is, or have you already told us?
Well, quail have a special part in my heart, but I do love some other ones, including painted bunting, as EJ mentioned, and then a red and black bird called the scarlet tanager. That one I love too.
Well, I love this conversation. If people want to learn more about the Tombigbee Forest Bird Partnership, where can they go, girls?
They can go to American Bird Conservancy. We've got a little bit on our website, or they can reach out to me or to Kristine.
All righty. Well, thank you. I look forward to keeping up with this partnership. Y'all are welcome anytime. If you find a new bird or the next bird, EJ, we want first dibs on it.
Absolutely. I've got a Baltimore Oriole coming to my feeders these days, so I'm pretty fired up about that.
That's pretty cool. All right, girls. Well, I appreciate your time. Thank you for all that you're doing. And, yeah, good luck with it.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thanks, Rebecca.
This makes me very sad. Remember last year, Rhino, when I got the Christmas gift of a lifetime, and it was the bird feeder that had the motion camera in it, and then my Wi-Fi ended up not being the right connection or whatever. It just ended up not working. That was the biggest disappointment in Christmas gifting I'd ever given. But if you have one of those, I think it's super cool to be able to bird watch with new technology. How cool is that? All right, stick with us. We got more for you up next.